What if the deadliest weapon of World War II wasn't dropped from the sky, but shipped by rail, hidden in timetables and paper trails? In the shadows of Nuremberg, a man in glasses and a clean uniform stood trial, not for murder, but for scheduling it. You're about to uncover a quiet evil, a war crime committed with ink instead of blood, and the haunting silence of a clipboard that signed away millions. The wind screamed across the iron decks as Convoy PQ-17 slipped into the icy silence of the Barents Sea. December 14, 1943. The war in Europe was entering its final, desperate years, but in the Arctic, death remained timeless. A flotilla of 35 merchant ships, escorted by 6 destroyers, 3 corvettes, and 2 Royal Navy cruisers, pushed northward toward Murmansk. Supplies were critical: tanks, ammunition, fuel, canned food. Stalin's Red Army was starving at the gates of Leningrad, and the Allies knew the cost of failure. But this was no ordinary convoy. Hidden among the freighters was the SS Thessalia, an unmarked Greek-flagged ship carrying an unacknowledged cargo, an experimental radar system known only to a handful of MI6 operatives and Churchill himself. Lieutenant Arthur Mallory of the Royal Navy, age 25, recorded his final journal entry from aboard HMS Hartley, a destroyer assigned to outer flank protection. His handwriting, recovered from a water-damaged logbook found wedged between collapsed steel plates in 1987, captured the unease of the voyage. Too quiet. The sea has a pulse, and tonight, it has none. I can feel something stalking us. The men are listening to the silence. German intelligence, aided by signals intercepted from poorly encrypted American transmissions, had known about PQ-17's departure. Admiral Karl Donitz, already a legend among U-boat commanders, ordered Operation Nebelwolf, the deployment of U-1229, a prototype submarine equipped with experimental passive sonar and magnetic stealth coating. Its mission: eliminate the SS Thessalia, and with it, the British radar system that threatened the Reich's Luftwaffe supremacy. The first ship vanished on the third night. A Norwegian tanker, Bergensfjord, sent no distress call. By morning, only an oil slick and floating wreckage marked the spot where it had once steamed. Captain Raymond Heath of the HMS Hartley raised the alert, but no sonar pings registered. It was as if the sea had swallowed it whole. MI6 agent Evelyn Foster, embedded on the Thessalia under the guise of a medical officer, recorded her suspicions in a coded diary. There's a predator here, something we can't detect. The men joke about ghost torpedoes, but the joke is dying fast. Her entries cease abruptly after December 17th. On the 6th day, HMS Hartley intercepted a garbled SOS. Shadows in the ice. They're beneath us, not machines, not natural. Before decoding was complete, the signal cut off. Hartley and her sister ship HMS Corby turned to investigate, but what they found defied naval logic. A freighter, SS Chariot, was frozen in a block of ice, hull split like an orange peel from within. No bodies. No blood. Just frozen uniforms scattered on the deck like autumn leaves. Back in London, Bletchley Park intercepted fragments of an Enigma communication from U-1229. The decrypted line read, "Experimental vessel successful. Thessalia acquired. Prepare extraction via Black Sun route." Historians would later dismiss Black Sun as a myth. Nazi occultism intersecting science fiction, but MI6 didn't laugh. 2 days later, Churchill personally ordered Convoy PQ-17 to scatter, fearing complete annihilation. That decision doomed the fleet. Isolated and stripped of their protection, ship after ship fell to the ghostly U-boat. Witnesses aboard HMS Corby reported no torpedo trails, no periscope, no radar contact, only flashes of light beneath the waves and sudden silence. The men whispered of sonar pings returning their own echoes distorted, as if the sea was answering them. On December 21st, a massive storm struck, separating the last remaining vessels. HMS Hartley, with Lieutenant Mallory still aboard, transmitted its final broadcast, visibility 0. Compass spinning. We are not alone. The signal cut off mid-transmission. Years passed. The Soviet Union recovered 3 freighters from PQ-17 near the Novaya Zemlya archipelago, half submerged in ice. The Thessalia was not among them. Neither was HMS Hartley. In 1987, a joint British-Russian expedition funded under the guise of oil exploration uncovered a mass of twisted steel on the seabed, believed to be the remains of Hartley. Within its half-crushed bridge, Mallory's journal was found encased in a brass signal box. Alongside it, curiously, was a device no one had documented before, a black, box-like cylinder with riveted seams and no visible markings. Naval historians speculated it could be an early radar transponder prototype, or something entirely different. The journal's final page read, "It's not just a submarine. It listens, it learns. The ocean isn't empty. It remembers." To this day, Convoy PQ-17 remains a case study in naval strategy failure. Official records list 23 ships lost. The whereabouts of the Thessalia and the radar prototype remain unknown. In 2011, satellite sonar surveys of the Barents Sea recorded an anomaly, circular in shape, approximately 150 meters wide, moving slowly against the current near the last known position of PQ-17. Russian vessels dispatched to investigate reported complete equipment failure. The anomaly vanished within hours. Naval Command called it a glitch. Some believe PQ-17 was simply outgunned by German efficiency and sabotage. Others whisper of secret Nazi technologies and stealth warfare decades ahead of its time. A few, citing Mallory's final words, speak of something older in the ice, something the war only awoke. And then, there are those who swear that on stormy Arctic nights, you can still hear the Morse code of HMS Hartley's final call, trapped in the wind, echoing from beneath a frozen sea. In the bitter summer of 1944, the city of Warsaw prepared to explode. Every rooftop whispered of rebellion. Allied airwaves buzzed with coded signals. The Soviets gathered ominously at the edge of the Vistula River, and the Polish Home Army waited for a sign to rise. What history remembers as the Warsaw Uprising, led by General Komorowski and centered in the western districts, masked another movement, a secret, short-lived, and ultimately tragic insurrection buried in silence. The Rebellion of Warsaw South, codenamed Operation Ember. The uprising was born not in a command room, but in a candlelit basement of a Catholic orphanage in the Praga district. Here, 17-year-old Elżbieta Karski passed forged documents to Jewish children and smuggled British radio parts in loaves of hollowed rye bread. Her older brother Jakub, a railway engineer by day and Home Army liaison by night, had access to German transport maps and fuel routes. With the Red Army visible on the East Bank and rumors swirling that Stalin would support an insurrection, the Praga resistance believed they had only one chance. The plan was reckless: seize the German-controlled rail depot in South Warsaw, halt the supply of reinforcements to the western districts, and hold until Soviet armor crossed the river. Supplies were minimal. Weapons had been scavenged or stolen. 2 machine guns, several rusted rifles, and a dozen Molotov cocktails brewed from perfume alcohol. Their radio, cobbled together by an underground SOE operator known only as Barnaby, could broadcast on a shortwave frequency for just 6 minutes at a time. On August 3, while the main uprising had already consumed central Warsaw, Elżbieta and 50 insurgents launched Operation Ember at 3:12 a.m. The depot guards were caught off guard. Within 15 minutes, 4 locomotives were disabled, signal towers were burning, and the main fuel tanks ruptured. By dawn, thick black smoke coiled above the rail yard. Elżbieta stood atop a boxcar, holding the red and white Polish flag stitched by orphaned girls under her care. The reaction was swift. German forces dispatched from Wilno stormed the southern tracks by mid-morning, expecting untrained peasants. But Operation Ember was no mob. Jakub had mined the entrance bridge using stolen Wehrmacht explosives, buying his unit precious hours. Elżbieta's squad held the central warehouse, fending off attack after attack, using abandoned coal carts as barricades. That night, the insurgents managed to transmit a plea across the river. Holding Praga South. Minimal arms. Expecting Soviet aid. Ember burns. The Soviets heard it. So did Churchill. So did London's Polish government in exile. None answered. What they did not know was that Stalin had issued secret orders to halt the Soviet advance and allow the Polish resistance, both west and south, to be crushed. A non-communist Warsaw was a threat to his plans for post-war dominance. The Red Army watched with binoculars as flames rose from the depot. Stalin, in correspondence discovered decades later, referred to the southern insurgents as inconvenient embers soon to fade. By August 6th, the rebels were down to their last bullets. Jakub was killed during a nighttime skirmish, trying to disable an incoming German supply train. His body was never recovered. Elżbieta, wounded in the thigh, took command. She ordered her fighters to scatter into the sewer tunnels and regroup in the abandoned brewery on Targowa Street. It was there, 3 days later, that the SS surrounded them, lured by a captured transmission intercepted by German radio experts. What followed was not a battle, but a slaughter. With only 2 rounds left in her pistol, Elżbieta was captured alive. Her execution was scheduled for August 14th, but never carried out. A former German archivist claims she was taken to Gestapo headquarters, interrogated about British communications, and later transferred to an unknown location under Special Reich orders. The rebellion was over. The depot burned for 3 more days. Soviet tanks crossed the Vistula weeks later, only after the Western uprising had been crushed and the Home Army annihilated. No mention of Operation Ember appeared in official reports. Its fighters were not listed among the honored dead. For decades, the rebellion was dismissed as myth. Only in 1998 did construction workers uncover a sealed storeroom beneath the Praga brewery. Inside were crates of handwritten journals, weapons fragments, and a blood-stained flag. Among them was a broken radio transmitter, etched with the words, *, if we fall, let them know we stood. *. Historians examining the recovered documents were stunned. Names matched long-lost resistance records. One journal, kept by a young fighter named Mieczysław Konarski, chronicled every day of the rebellion with chilling clarity. Elżbieta doesn't cry, he wrote on August 7th. She bandaged her own wound with part of the flag. When she told us we were the fire, not the ashes, we believed her. The story of Operation Ember has since become a symbol among modern Polish youth, a story of abandoned courage, erased defiance, and quiet martyrdom. A small monument now stands at the former rail depot, bearing only the initials EK and a single phrase, *, not all flames are seen. To this day, no photo of Elżbieta Karski has ever been found. Her fate remains a mystery. But in the early mornings when trains pass through South Warsaw, old workers swear they sometimes hear faint static on the wind, short bursts, almost like Morse code, echoing from the steel and stone, calling from the shadows of history. In early 1945, as Allied troops closed in on Berlin and the Reich's final hour drew near, a coded message was intercepted by the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in Lisbon. Marked Wolfram Priority, the transmission hinted at something astonishing. Elements of Nazi Germany's nuclear research team were fleeing Europe, not to the Alps, but to the jungles of South America. Thus began Operation Eclipse, a top-secret OSS mission to intercept what American intelligence feared could be a last-ditch effort by the Nazis to construct a primitive atomic device deep within the Amazon basin. The mission was led by Major Thomas Halvorsen, a Norwegian-American linguist turned intelligence officer with experience in sabotage and wilderness survival. Alongside him was a team of 6, 2 former French resistance fighters, a demolitions expert from Brooklyn, and 2 Brazilian scouts fluent in the Tupi-Guarani dialects. Their destination, a remote stretch of jungle near the Rio Yari, where aerial surveillance showed evidence of recent construction, an airstrip and several metal-roofed buildings obscured beneath the forest canopy. The operation's urgency came from an intercepted letter, smuggled out of Zurich, signed only L. The note referenced the relocation of Uranverein assets and the continued development of Gerät Veer. Uranverein, the Nazi nuclear program, was thought to be years behind the Manhattan Project, but the possibility of a dirty bomb, or worse, in enemy hands on the American continent could not be ignored. In the dense humidity of March, Halvorsen's team navigated through piranha-infested waters, enduring fevers, infected wounds, and constant swarms of insects. The deeper they went, the more evidence emerged. Empty crates with Luftwaffe markings. A rusted motorcycle with SS insignia. On the 6th day, they encountered a terrified rubber tapper who spoke of a forbidden valley, where white men in black uniforms burned animals and sang strange songs at night. On March 17th, the OSS team found it. Camouflaged beneath a canopy of palm and ironwood trees lay a small compound, guard towers, 2 steel sheds, and a large concrete dome surrounded by electrical fencing. At its center, a dish-shaped antenna aimed skyward, and 3 tall chimneys billowing black smoke. Through binoculars, they saw what appeared to be German scientists in white coats, armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and a small plane, possibly a Fiesler Fi-156, tethered beside a fuel truck bearing the logo of a long-defunct Argentine mining firm. Using nightfall as cover, Halvorson's scouts snuck closer. What they discovered defied expectation. Inside the dome was a crude reactor chamber, cylindrical metal pipes surrounded by lead shielding and coils of copper wire. Charts tacked to the wall bore German equations and the words subkritischer Test and Zeitverzögerung. The OSS team photographed everything. It appeared the Germans were attempting to create a subcritical mass device, not enough to trigger a chain reaction, but enough to contaminate water, air, and infrastructure across a wide area. A psychological weapon. Even more disturbing was a second chamber labeled Project Morgenstern, Morning Star. Inside were diagrams of a large canister-shaped payload designed to be dropped from altitude and fitted with timer fuses. One photograph showed the outline of a city on the Brazilian coast, Belém. Halvorson's team voted unanimously to act. There would be no waiting for reinforcements. At 2:14 a.m. on March 19th, they launched their assault. Using handmade explosives and Molotov cocktails, they disabled the main power generator, igniting a fire that quickly spread to the fuel depot. Caught off guard, the German guards scrambled to respond, but resistance fighters Remy Devereaux and Jules Herten held them off long enough for Halvorson to enter the main dome. There, he found Dr. Ernst Feldkamp, a fictional composite of several real Nazi scientists, frantically attempting to destroy documents. Halvorson shot him before he could ignite a thermite charge. Explosions rocked the compound. One Brazilian scout was killed in the crossfire. Another was never found. At sunrise, the OSS team rigged the remaining fuel tanks and detonated the facility. The jungle consumed what was left. 3 days later, Halvorson and the survivors were airlifted out by a U.S. Navy floatplane. The photographs, blueprints, and fragments of uranium rods they recovered were classified under Eclipse Black and buried in the OSS archives. Officially, Operation Eclipse never occurred. The Rio Yari compound was said to be a rubber research station that burned during a local rebellion. Decades later, in 1979, during a declassification sweep, a partial report on Eclipse was uncovered. It described Nazi atomic experimentation in Amazon basin and referenced an artifact labeled Reactor Assembly G4A. The object was never located. The Brazilian government continues to deny knowledge of any such facility. However, indigenous tribes in the region still speak of the metal mountain that burned for days and poisoned the river. Fish vanished. Birds died in flight. One elder, interviewed in 1992, said the spirits of the forest wept for a year. Some believe that a second, undiscovered facility may still exist deeper in the jungle. Conspiracy theorists claim remnants of the Nazi nuclear team were absorbed into post-war South American regimes, or even smuggled into Operation Paperclip. No evidence supports these claims. What remains is the haunting possibility that, in the final collapse of Hitler's empire, a desperate group of men came close, terrifyingly close, to unleashing a different kind of fire on the world. Not in Europe, not in Japan, but in the heart of the Amazon. And that if the OSS team had arrived just days later, the jungles of Brazil might have become ground zero for a nightmare history dared not remember. When most people remember the Battle of Britain, they recall the roar of Spitfires over Kent, the sirens wailing across London, and Churchill's immortal defiance. But behind the radio speeches and air raids, a quiet war was being waged in drawing rooms, concert halls, and smoke-filled pubs, a war of rhythm, radio, and coded harmony. At the heart of this musical resistance stood a woman whose name was erased from the official records, but whose notes still echo through history. Margaret Langley, the Spitfire Pianist. Born in 1913 in Brighton, Margaret was a musical prodigy from an early age. She debuted at the Royal Albert Hall by 18 and had a recording contract by 21. But when her younger brother, Flight Officer Peter Langley, was shot down over the Channel in July 1940, everything changed. She vanished from the public eye, cancelled her performances, and moved to a modest flat near Hampstead Heath. To the public, she was grieving. In truth, she had joined an underground operation under the Special Operations Executive, SOE, known as Songbird. Songbird's mission was unorthodox, to embed coded intelligence within musical broadcasts. With the Luftwaffe blitzing London nightly, standard communication lines were unreliable. Resistance groups in France, RAF forward observers, and even agents embedded within Nazi high command needed a new medium of information. Music was everywhere, on radios, in cinemas, in private homes. It became the ideal carrier. Margaret's piano compositions, performed live on the BBC Home Service, were more than music. Using a system developed by Polish cryptographers and refined by MI6 mathematicians, she encoded information in the timing, key changes, and note patterns of her original pieces. A sharp shift to F minor at the 33rd second might indicate troop movement. A suspended chord held for precisely 9 beats could signal an impending air raid. Her broadcasts were short, never more than 6 minutes, to avoid suspicion. To the untrained ear, they were haunting wartime ballads. To those who knew how to listen, they were weapons. Her most famous composition, Hymn for the Clouds, was broadcast on September 14, 1940, 2 days before what would become known as Battle of Britain Day. The piece began softly, almost hesitant, before building into a defiant crescendo. Hidden within its bars were orders redirecting RAF squadrons to new intercept positions that ultimately led to the British downing of 56 enemy aircraft in a single day. Wing Commander Alan Royce later said, "We had no idea why we were moved. Only that the orders came from Celeste. That's what we called the pianist. She saved lives with her fingers." Margaret performed from a specially reinforced BBC bunker in the heart of London, surrounded by armed guards and under constant supervision. Her identity was known only to a handful of operatives. Even other musicians in the studio thought she was merely there for morale broadcasts. Her cover was impeccable. A frequent cigarette in one hand, sheet music in the other, she maintained the air of a fragile, grieving artist. No one suspected the coded fury beneath her melancholic arpeggios. But the Nazis were listening, too. In late 1941, a pattern analyst in Berlin's Abwehr intelligence division noticed something strange in certain BBC broadcasts. Musical sequences that repeated irregularly, coinciding with known sabotage efforts or successful RAF raids. The Gestapo ordered the development of a program, code-named Klojlied, Dirge, to analyze British music for embedded messages. Margaret was ordered to cease transmissions. But she refused. "I won't let them silence me," she wrote in her personal journal, recovered decades later. "If my brother died screaming into the wind, the least I can do is fight back with melody." In early 1942, she composed her most dangerous piece, Elegy for Iron. It was a 9-minute fugue broadcast only once, believed to contain orders for coordinated partisan sabotage across occupied France. Railroad junctions, bridges, and fuel depots exploded within 72 hours of the performance. SOE internal documents recorded an unprecedented spike in French insurgent success. The Abwehr finally identified a pattern. British intelligence picked up increased German chatter regarding Die Klavierspielerin, the piano spy. Fearing assassination or capture, MI6 moved Margaret to a safe house in Cornwall. But she never made it. Her train derailed just outside Reading. Officially, it was recorded as an accident. An old bridge collapsed under weight. But survivors reported seeing a man leap from the train moments before the crash, dressed in dark clothes, vanishing into the trees. Margaret's body was never recovered. Some say she died in the wreckage. Others believe she was taken, disappeared by the same enemies who had tried and failed to silence her through bombs and bullets. The war ended, and the Songbird program was buried beneath layers of classification. The world returned to normal. Margaret Langley faded from memory, her records quietly removed from BBC archives. Hymn for the Clouds was attributed to a composer named Edward Holgate, a name that doesn't appear before or after the war. It wasn't until 1995, when declassified SOE files were released to a small group of historians, that her story began to re-emerge. A single photograph showed her seated at a battered upright piano, cigarettes smoldering in an ashtray, sheet music annotated in strange mathematical notations. Today, a fragment of Elegy for Iron survives, etched onto a war memorial plaque in Hampstead. Visitors often hear a recording played in the park, soft and haunting. Most walk past without a second thought. But a few pause. And those who know the truth swear they can still hear something more beneath the music. A warning, a message, or maybe just the echo of defiance from a woman who turned her grief into resistance, her sorrow into strategy. Margaret Langley never wore a uniform. She never fired a gun. Yet, in the words of one RAF pilot, she shot down more planes with a piano than I did with a hurricane. The world turned its eyes to Nuremberg in 1945, as the victors of the Second World War assembled a tribunal to hold the vanquished accountable. The courtroom brimmed with familiar monsters, Goering, Hess, Ribbentrop, faces that had orchestrated global catastrophe. Yet buried in the lower tiers of the accused sat a man unknown to the press, unmentioned in Allied propaganda, and ignored by most observers, SS Standartenführer Otto Krieger, a logistics officer whose crime was not killing, but scheduling. Krieger's title was deceptively simple: Director of Rail Traffic Efficiency, Central Transport Authority. His desk job in Berlin placed him in charge of routing train movements across occupied Europe. Coal, weapons, laborers, and, as uncovered by captured Reich documents, people, specifically Jews, Romani, political prisoners. Millions of them. The prosecution's case against Krieger was unlike any other. He had never visited a concentration camp. He never fired a weapon. His uniform was unstained by blood. Yet the transport lists bore his signature. The freight manifests from Krakow to Auschwitz, from Paris to Dachau, bore the tidy initials OK in the bottom corner, signifying his final authorization. The American chief prosecutor, Robert Jackson, understood the difficulty. We must prove that even the quiet bureaucrat, the man in the shadows, can be complicit in genocide. That evil does not always wear a scarred face or shout commands. It sometimes sits behind a desk and draws lines on a map. Krieger's defense attorney, a young German barrister named Lucas Brenner, argued that his client had no knowledge of the camp's true function. He was told these were relocation transports. Orders came from above. He did not question, he did not see. He followed the law. Krieger himself, thin and bespectacled, spoke only once during his trial. I was a cog. No more. No less. But evidence said otherwise. A turning point came when the French delegation introduced Le Cahier de Rose, the Rose Notebook, a diary kept by a Jewish schoolteacher named Anouk Levy, deported from Lyon in 1943. Her notebook, hidden in the lining of a suitcase and later discovered in the rubble of a bombed train depot near Munich, detailed her journey from arrest to the final train platform. Her last entry read, "We are sorted like cattle. The man at the station wears a suit, not a uniform. He holds a clipboard and does not meet our eyes. He ticks the box when the last child boards. Then the whistle blows." Photographic comparison confirmed that the man at the station was Otto Krieger. A blurry image from a French railway inspector's ID camera captured Krieger on the platform at Lyon-Perrache, clipboard in hand. He had personally overseen departures. Under cross-examination, Krieger did not deny the photo. I was ordered to ensure departure times. That is all. A second piece of damning evidence came from British intelligence, an intercepted communication between Krieger and Reich Transport Minister Albert Ganzenmüller. In it, Krieger lamented the inefficiency of mixed cargo, stating, *, civilian freight shares space with special human transport. This leads to delay and odor complaints. Asterisk, the phrase odor complaints sent a wave of nausea through the courtroom. Reporters from the Times and the New York Herald printed it in bold. Testimonies followed. A Czech conductor, visibly shaken, described seeing Krieger at Prague's Bubny station, watching silently as children were herded into boxcars. An Italian translator recalled Krieger reviewing timetables with local fascist officials, emphasizing punctuality despite minor complications such as illness or resistance. Then came the witness no one expected. SS Obergruppenführer Ernst Kaltenbrunner, already sentenced to death, agreed to testify against Krieger. His motives were unclear, perhaps spite, perhaps an attempt to appear cooperative in his final hours. Krieger knew, Kaltenbrunner growled from the stand. We all did. He saw the numbers. You can't transport that many people and not wonder why none ever came back. The courtroom fell silent. Krieger's defense collapsed. But debate continued outside the courtroom. Was logistical efficiency a war crime? Was detachment a shield? Could a man who never set foot in a gas chamber still be guilty of mass murder? In the end, the tribunal delivered its verdict, guilty of crimes against humanity. Otto Krieger was sentenced to life imprisonment, not death. Some said it was too lenient. Others said it was just. He was sent to Spandau prison. Over the years, his name faded. No biographies were written. No movies made. He died in his cell in 1971. No family claimed the body. But his trial left behind a legacy far beyond his life. In 1963, during the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials, a young German prosecutor quoted the Krieger case. When the trains ran on time, the killing was efficient. When they didn't, the Reich faltered. Let us remember the timetable was also a weapon. Krieger's clipboard, recovered from the Paris archives, is now housed in the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. Visitors often walk past it quickly, unaware of its weight. It looks ordinary, aged wood, metal clasp, faded ink stains. Yet beneath its surface lies the signature of silence, the cost of unasked questions, the evidence of death by delegation. A small plaque beneath the display reads, Asterisk, the death camps required many hands. Some did not hold guns. Some held pens. Asterisk. The trial of Otto Krieger remains a quiet cornerstone in the legal architecture of modern war crimes. It proved, above all, that guilt does not need a weapon, only the willful turning of one's eyes. And that history remembers even those who tried to disappear behind the schedules. He never pulled a trigger, never gave the order to kill. Yet with every box he ticked, the machinery of genocide roared to life. The world wanted monsters with snarling faces, but sometimes the most terrifying ones sit behind desks, wearing a tie, speaking softly. And when the trains ran on time, death was punctual. The question remains, how many crimes have we missed, because they were too quiet to hear?